Okay, so this is chapter 5, and I clicked on the little piece of paper up here, and this box came up, and I want to be on English, and I want to be standard, IPT, and I go to create. So first, this chapter talks a lot about constraints. So start out with a sketch, and on the XY plane, if you remember, I mentioned the grid pattern. I've got mine changed so the grid pattern does show up and it tells me that I'm in the sketch mode. So I'm going to create a triangle. I'm not going to put any dimensions in here yet. I'm not going to tie it into 0. Just going to create that shape. Right click OK. And then I'm going to start adding some information. So let's see. I think we're coming up on the first question here. Okay, so question number 1 comes from the PowerPoint. So in the PowerPoint I gave you for this chapter, I list all of these symbols. Actually, the first 1, 2, 3, 4 questions are shown here. The symbols are shown here, but I'm going to use those. I'm going to mention them again. One of the questions that I don't use is shown on this page, but I took a screenshot of each of these. Normally they're stacked on top of each other, but I didn't have enough room to list what each one was. If you hover close to one in Inventor, it'll tell you what it is, and using constraints will help constrain your sketches, and it also keeps your sketches from changing. You know, if you want a line to always be horizontal or always to be vertical or perpendicular, parallel, any one of these, and later we're going to use tangent. So, first, I've got an extra little line in here. Let me delete that. And then I want to take this and slide it over till it clicks onto there. So I'm going to add a dimension, because right now the sketch is not constrained. I don't really care that much what the dimension is at this time. I'm also coming up on question number 2, and I'm going to add some constraints to the sketch. One of those is a dimension constraint, and then I'm going to add, and then a horizontal constraint should have been added automatically, but there's a button over here right beside dimension says show constraints. Then I can click on things. You can see your horizontal constraint. I'm going to click on these other 2 lines. Well, there's nothing really there except that they tie into the endpoints. So I'm going to right click to get out of that, and then I'm going to tie this end. I've got a dimension for it, and then I'm going to tie it in using this constraint, and it fixes it to a particular location in space. So I click on that, and you can see that I'm showing that particular icon too. If I right click and click OK to get out of that command, then I can go over to one of my other constraints, and I can right click and I can hide all constraints. So I can see that this line is fixed with a dimension, and then I also added the fixed constraint at the end. Now we're coming up on question number 3. 1, 2, 3. And I'm going to add some more constraints to this. I added the fixed constraint there. Let me see. Right click, show all constraints. Yeah, it's still there. I didn't see it, so I was kind of wondering if it was or not. So I want this line to be vertical. So I'm going to left click on the vertical constraint, and then click on that line. So you can see slowly I'm tying this sketch down using constraints. So I'm going to put in an angle between here and here to help tie that down. Then the only thing I'm missing is to tie it to 0. So I'm going to put a dimension here. Okay, probably because I had the fixed constraint in there. And actually, I'm going to bring this up a little bit. Actually, I don't need any more. I was fully constrained before I added that. And probably because this point was fixed in space. So notice when it puts parentheses around it, it means that that dimension is driven by something else. So that dimension is driven by that fixed point in space. So I'm coming up on question number 4, and I'm going to add a circle in here. Just place it anywhere. Now, I know I can dimension that. I can dimension the diameter. I can also mention the location. But this time, I'm going to use this tangent constraint, and I'm going to make this circle tangent with that line. And then what if I also wanted to add one here? I'm still in the tangent command, and then add one here. So I could actually make that circle tangent with all of those edges, and now it's fully constrained because I've tied that down to the triangle, and the triangle itself was already constrained. So that takes care of some of those. I'm still showing all my constraints. If I took off one of these, let me right click and get out of the tangent constraint. Right click here, delete that one. I'm going to delete that one. Once I take out some of those, then I can make adjustments. And see, my circle, since I only took out 2 of the tangents instead of 3, it remains tangent with that side. Even if I move in the center now, it always remains tangent to that. So you can see how sometimes they would be helpful. Once a constraint is read, you can right click and you can delete it. You can also choose your sketch, left click to choose it, and then hide all constraints to take those out. So you can use those back and forth as you need to. Let's start another sketch. Standard IPT, create. And I'm going to start a sketch on this face. I'm going to use center point, 2-point center rectangle, and I'm going to put the center of it there and make the rectangle like that. And then I'm just going to add some dimensions in here. I'm going to put a circle in here. This time I'm purposely not tying it down to any particular location. And 0.5. And let's say that I want this circle to always be in the center of this rectangle, even if I change the dimensions of the rectangle. So I'm going to place circle here to here, and I'm going to make it a function of this dimension. So I'm going to left click on that, and then I'm going to say divided by 2 and press enter, so that location will always be a function of the 3. I'm going to do the same thing here from the center of there to the edge. Then I want to always make that one a function of this one. So I left click, divided by 2. So now that I have that information, I can see that my sketch is fully constrained. But this should answer question number 5. So be looking for that. I'm going to go to the Manage toolbar and look for Parameters, just to show you what Autodesk Inventor does with that information as I was dimensioning it. It assigns labels to all the dimensions, and then if they have an equation, it lists it here. So that's why you saw some of that information about when I was tying in parts, then here. That one was DO divided by 2. So that was this dimension is DO because this one is D4. So click that. Let's see. Okay, I'm going to go ahead, right click, finish sketch. Give that a thickness of, let's say, 0.5. And now you don't have to go all the way back to your sketch tab. And this is the answer to question 6. And I can go to inspect and measure. And then I can pick a line or a point. I'm going to pick that line, and it tells me that it's 0.5. Suppose I want to know what that dimension is, and it will tell me excuse me, the dimensions of that side or the dimensions of that hole. So that's just another way, without going all the way back to sketch, that you can look at those. So let's see, the next thing I wanted to talk about, I believe it was one of the labs. Yes, it was lab 5-4. So it was a couple of different ways you can do this, including if you wanted to use multiple sketches. And you know, you would have to do this donut and then give that an extrusion thickness. Then you would have to add on a tab, use a rectangle, and extrude join that. And then over here you'd have a rectangle, and that would be extrude cut. But I was just showing you how you can look for a busy profile, and that is this C shape with a handle on it. So I drew that in one sketch. So when I drew that, what I did was, in order for this 0.5 inch wide tab to always reference the center of the circle, then I used a dimension that was fixed to that 0.5, so that if I ever changed the 0.5, then this would change with it, and that tab would always stay centered. And I did the same thing over here. So I just made these dimensions that are circled in red, I made those fixed to tie those into I just want to be sure I covered the last question. Okay, so to be sure that I'm always tied into there. Okay, there was one more thing I wanted to show you. And I'm going to open up one that I just created. Is that it? No. I will find it. Okay, so this one, I'm going to show you how I did this first one. Right click, edit feature. Okay, so this one, first I'm going to, I think I'll delete it. Yep, do it again. So this is the answer to the last question. And remember that we talked about there's a handful of commands that you can use without developing a sketch. So hole is one of those, fillet is one of those too, chamfer. Anyway, I'm going to click on hole, and I'm going to click where I want the plane that I want the hole to be. Now this one is a counter bore. It's described as 0.5 inch diameter, and then it's got a counter bore symbol, 1 inch diameter, and then it's got a little arrowhead like it's going down for a depth, 0.125. So right here where it says hole, I'm going to use simple hole, but over here where it says seat, it says none. I'm going to click on counter bore, and then I can either put in a, well, I thought I did select the surface. Oh, I know what. It was on, you know, did I want it to go all the way through? Did I want it to go through all, or distance, through all, or to a particular face? So these little dimensions here for the counter bore, I need to left click on those so I can put that outside diameter was 1 inch, and then it went in 0.125. and then this size was 0.5. Now don't forget to put in your dimensions. This one was 1, I think. Yep. And then this dimension was 1. So once I do that, I can click OK, and so it cuts that counter bore for me, and it gives an area to sit that counter, that bolt with the counter head on it. I can sit it in that little seat. So that's what I wanted to cover. Be sure to do labs 5.3, 5.4, and 5.5.